drug court, and I have Alexander Lindsay here, who teaches trial tactics at Pitt, and I have the district attorney in Mercer County. And how long have you been doing that now? About a year and a half?
15 months.
Right. Miles Carson, and you guys are always pitted against each other, and I want to say, first of all, Mr. Lindsay, hats off to you. What you may not be aware of, I don't know if you know this, Miles, is that the factual pattern that creates the trial was written by Mr. Lindsay as a playwright. And I think you wrote it pretty tight.
Yes, in a way I regret that the jury didn't hear it all, because I think it would have perhaps balanced it a little better, as it was meant to be.
But you pulled one out of your back pocket when you started chastising the government for not putting experts when we had no witnesses either, by the way. Did you notice that?
I noticed that.
Hey, well.
All's fair in war. I'm sitting there going, I don't know if I'm going to throw a penalty flag or not. Anyway, but all three of us have become good friends as well as doing this. But again, I can never understate how nice it is for you guys to do this for these kids, because you may not be aware, this video, the graduation day movie, was added to our program years after we started doing it. And I had a gentleman that taught me torts in law school, Kelly Stribe's husband, Mike. Mike said, you got to get this movie Graduation Day. It is very good. Mm-hmm. So Graduation Day comes from a man named Bob Pack. Right. Bob Pack paid from proceeds of a lawsuit, from what I hear, the death of his kids, to have this kids amateur movie made into something with Dan Rather narrated. But even he seems to have trouble getting kids to look at it. But Mr. Lindsay, now that you made it a trial, the kids are engaged. And I have to tell you, thank you again. Anything else? Anything you wanted to say about your closing argument? You talked about the scapegoat thing. Can you explain that in a little more depth?
Oh, that's a reference. It's an interesting thing. Sometimes in a closing argument, you give a jury, you want to get their attention, and so what you do is you teach them something. Often I think that we as lawyers, when we're speaking to a jury, we're teachers first and foremost. And I always thought it was interesting, the origin of the word scapegoat. We say someone is a scapegoat for this, someone is a scapegoat for that. And the origin of that phrase goes back to a Bible reference in Leviticus 16, where the children of Israel would, every year, they would go before Aaron the high priest. It's what's called the Day of Atonement. And they would confess all of their sins. And there were two goats that were brought forward. There was the sacrificial goat, who was the goat that they would sacrifice to the Lord because of the sins. But the other goat's the one that's interesting. Aaron would take all of these sins and he would place them on the head of the goat. And then they would take the goat out into the desert and have it wander away. And that goat was called the scapegoat. And so the origin of the term scapegoat means is when you're taking everybody else's sins and placing it on the head of one individual, we call that person a scapegoat. But it comes from that biblical goat.
And then the obvious connection was, and you know what, I could see this if I was a prosecutor, and I do both sides, I've done both, I can say that, you know, that's obviously a calculated decision that you went in to say, we're not contesting that he was DUI.
No.
And sometimes, you know, some other lawyers would say, I'm going to fight to the death on everything, make him prove everything. That seems to be playing into what you want from the jury by saying there's some responsibility. Is that right?
Well, what it really is as a lawyer, I always have a theory that there's a 5-step process that you need to get an acquittal. Number one, you want the jury to like you and trust you. Like, I'm a no BS guy. I'm going to tell you the way it is. I'm not going to kid you. He's guilty of those offenses, and I'm not going to argue something I don't believe in.
So one, the jury likes you.
Number two, the next step is to try to make the jury like your client, have some affinity with the client, humanize your client. Step three is to make the jury want to find for your client. In other words, if they could find a way that they'd like to do this. 4 is you show them a way. And for example, in this particular case, the way is that one element. You find the one element, this is what you do. And the 5th one, that perhaps I didn't stress enough, is you go from this is your way to do what you want to do, to if you really follow the judge's charge, you're compelled to do it. I'm sorry, folks, you don't have any choice. You've got to find a client not guilty on that count, even if you want to. We didn't perhaps dwell enough on that in this particular case.
Well, and again, I want to emphasize the fact that this is done in front of a live audience, which doesn't happen in a courtroom. And we have kids that have to be fidgety and whatnot. So, but I have to tell you, as a 30-year attorney and an educator for 10 years, and a school assistant principal, and a coach, and I've been a failed politician a few times, communication, man, both of you were just like right on. You just like, this is great. And I can't emphasize enough now. I can see where that scapegoat thing now, you would basically say that, and you did say it to the closing the jury, paint the picture of the Commonwealth being a little bit greener. They want it all. It's not enough. They want one guy to carry all of these burdens. And in the movie, again, if you had more time to develop it with a real jury, I'm sure you would have come out and said the sins of the parents who bought the alcohol, the sins of the girl who said, take a look at the camera, I want you to say something, the sins of the guy driving through the red light that struck them. They want his sins on my guy's head too. I think probably you would have ended with that. Some passionate approach.
Well, you have to be careful.
Go too far, huh?
Yeah, in other words, you can say you could raise the issue. One of the things is, I believe that attorneys who are too aggressive, it's a turnoff. When I used to be a prosecutor, I was almost kind of like, look, you may like the defendant. Quite frankly, I like the defendant. And he's maybe a better human being than I am. But you see, the evidence shows he actually did this. It's an unhappy day for all of us. In other words, none of this over-the-top zealousness. And with it being a criminal defense attorney, you can't go in front of a jury and come up with what we would call a crock. If you misstate something, I believe this, that the whole legal system, jurors in particular, are harder on defense attorneys. One slip, they'll get you. Whereas prosecutors,
spoken by a defense attorney.
Absolutely.
And a former prosecutor.
Okay. That's, which, by the way, is a perfect segue to you.
All right.
Miles, because we had a jury trial once, he and I was the defense attorney, and I gave my passionate thing, and I think I went too far, like you just got done saying. And he stood up, and I'll never forget it, he stood up and he walked over to the jury and he went, that exhale, kind of like you erased, like the dry erase board, erased half of my closing argument, the exhale alone. And then he said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't Perry Mason. This isn't, who was the guy Andy Griffith played, the attorney?
Matlock.
Matlock. He was saying 4 or 5 TV shows. He said, this is Mercer County, Pennsylvania. And he gave it that statesman-like approach, which, so tell me how this played into what you normally do.
In terms of this case?
Yeah.
From my perspective as a prosecutor, I go by what Al's talking about his 5-step approach. I don't know that I can be as eloquent in relaying it, but I do go into that courtroom with a couple of main ideas. Number one is, for me, I want to be in charge of the courtroom, and I want to be in charge in a low-key way, but I do want the jurers to look at me as the person who's in charge, and I'm the one who's leading them to the truth. And that's my first and foremost exercise, as I would say.
And I have to say, I've seen you in court. I've been on the other side. You are very, I think, cognizant of those 5 steps Mr. Lindsay talked about.
Yes, exactly.
Having that jury like you. I've seen you do that. You're a charming guy.
Well, you have to have that rapport with the jury. Absolutely. If you can get up, I characterize it a little less textbookish, but I call it getting up over the other lawyer. And that's in terms of being back in control of the courtroom and being control of that jury, and that like factor is a huge component of that control. And the seeker of the truth. from my perspective as a prosecutor, under no circumstances do I want jurors looking at me as someone who's trying to hide the ball or round corners. I am rolling it all out. And when I was on the opposite side and did the civil side of defense work for years, I approached it the exact same way. I'm in this courtroom to make sure that this jury has the entire truth, all the facts in front of them.
So whether you have the burden of proof or not, you and he seem to agree that there's at least 3 elements that you both agree on.
For sure.
With that
For sure. I'm not trying to lead, in a Commonwealth's case, lead jurors to a path of acquittal. I'm just the opposite. I'm trying to lead them to the path of conviction. Again, because I've evaluated my case, I have a duty to do that. I have a duty to do justice first and foremost. And that means that I'm trying someone on charges that I have facts that I can put before a jury that would sustain a conviction. I don't just do that for the heck of it.
Now, gentlemen, as we close, you guys have always come and always been here, and I know, aside from being an attorney, that both of you have a message that you can give these kids. And if we could take you maybe one at a time, and I'll go to you first, Miles, because I went to Mr. Lindsay first last time. What message would you like to leave the kids if we had more time and they were still in front of you, because they're going to see this?
Well, the last thing they want really is to have to interact with me in a professional way. So I would say to each and every one of them out there, if you come before me or the Mercer County District Attorney's Office, it's not going to be good for you.
That's your duty.
That's my duty. That's absolutely.
That's the hat we wear. Of course, if we tend to say, well, gee, that's what the anvil of litigation is.
Absolutely, and I don't mean that.
You know this. He'll push you back all they deserve.
Sure.
That's your job.
Absolutely.
You know, I can tell you this: if I lived in Mercer County, I would feel very comfortable that you are our top.
Thank you.
So,
Thank
Mr. Lindsay,
you.
what message would you give the kids?
Going to a party, drinking too much, and driving into dangers. But there's another danger that is not stressed enough, and that's simply drinking too much. Every holiday season, every prom season, we read in the paper that a young person, perhaps in a fraternity, and is overconsumed alcohol. And you see, young people are not attuned to what happens. You drink alcohol and you're too intoxicated to drive, and then you get tired, and then as your blood alcohol gets into the 0.28, 0.31, you start to get into a stupor state. It gets up around 4:0, and you die, and you're surprised. And what happens is, I always say that we have what I call the odorless, tasteless cheerleader killer. It's vodka. And here's how it works, and this is why we use so many young girls. Guy goes to a party with his girl, and he's 235 pounds, he's a linebacker, and he's got a 110-pound cheerleader on his arm. He drinks beer. But she's 18, 19, she doesn't drink beer. She's not used to it. So they make a concoction for her made up of some type of fruit juice, and they put in 3 shots of vodka to fill up the glass. He's got his glass, she has her glass. Now, the way alcohol works, she is consuming 6 times the alcohol with 3 shots, and she's half the weight.
With the same volume of liquid.
Well, it's the alcohol,
Right,
the
okay.
drink. Because every one of those shots contains the same amount of alcohol as one beer.
So with each drink, she's 6 timesing him.
That's exactly right. And he's pacing her. So he drinks 3 beers, and she's, in effect, had 18. And she goes back, and she goes to sleep, and she dies. I had a personal thing affect me. About half a mile from my house, there's a family that lives there, and the mother of these kids was a babysitter. She's about 5 years older than I am, maybe a little older than that. But they had 4 children, and they had 2 twins, and they were beautiful girls. They were cheerleaders, and they were really good students. And they were wonderful kiddos. And they were admitted into Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP. It was over the holiday season. They were invited to a party at IUP, and their parents didn't want them to go, but they went to the party, and anyway, and they had too much to drink, and one of them died that night. What happened is that I remember going to the funeral home, and their parents just beside themselves. How could this happen? You know, their daughters, against their wishes, went to this party, and one of them was found in a bedroom dead. And the worst part about it is that I gave my condolences to the father, and then I walked up to the coffin, and there in the coffin was this beautiful young girl, her body, and standing next to her was the mirror image of the live identical twin. And it's just, there's something of looking at this live girl with this incredibly sad look on her face and her identical twin sister laying there in the coffin. Over what? So what I like to say is that watch it, because you drink alcohol and you have to understand, particularly when you're drinking what we call hard liquor. The other thing I'd like to say to this, the second message is, this is what I live my life by. You can't predict the future. We don't know what the future is. And one of the things is that you have to understand when you're an 18 or 19-year-old that you don't know what your future is, and you don't know what your future could be. And you don't know when you, for example, get picked up on a drug charge, when you take that first opioid, when you use heroin and so forth, how that impacts your future. And one of the reasons I think people do drink too much and that young people do take addictive and narcotic drugs is they lack the idea that they can be something really special. All of us, all of us are plagued with some form of what I call self-destructive compulsive behavior. We all have something. I mean, we all have the capacity to be on one side like angels. On the other, there's something that's kicking us in the butt all the time about us, and it's a neck-and-neck race with us, and we're dealing with it. And what happens is that behavior, whether we drink too much, gamble too much, sexual indiscretions, whatever, it's always there. And there's a voice that's telling us, you think you could be something special, you think you could do something great. Who do you think you are? Because we know that you're an addict in some form or another. And what I'm saying is think about being angel-like and what we can do and accomplish. It's wonderful things. And all I'm saying is when you're 18, you don't know what the future holds for you. There are stories. Albert Einstein didn't speak until he was 4 years old. They thought he was mentally retarded. Ulysses Grant in 1860 was selling firewood in a faded military jacket in the streets of St. Louis. 5 years later, he was one of the most famous men in the world when, after he became president, Ulysses Grant toured the world. More people actually saw his face than any other person in the history of the world. And in 1865, he was selling firewood in a faded military jacket. You can't predict the future. So think about your future. Think about what you might be. Maybe a lot more than you dreamed of.
And so when you have two responsible citizens like you and gifted communicators, you have just converged. And I can't believe it's like you choreographed this. It comes down to choices. And the prosecutor is saying, don't make the wrong choice or avoid making a choice, or that's not good for you. I have a job to do. I don't want you to be in my office. And you're basically saying the same thing. So it comes down to those choices that you make or you choose not to make. You refrain from.
But we're all tempted.
We all have that.
In other words, it's fine to just say to young people, oh, don't make bad choices. We all make bad choices. And so what the thing is what I'm saying is, look, we understand the temptations out there. We understand how you're going to be led. Watch it. You may be a much better person than you dreamed of. That's all I'm saying.
And we connect the Honorable Judge Pizanski when he closed with the kids. He said, if you need help, ask for it.
Exactly.
Gentlemen, thank
Exactly.
you so much. I know you took so much time out of your busy day and grab something to eat. We'll get you this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Angela, very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Capretto, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And you've always been a regular with ours, and our group, and I know you'll blush when I say this, but it is said by more people than me that you are a world-renowned addiction physician. I mean, and you go all the way back to your mentor.
Dr. Abram Twersky, started with him in 1981 at St. Francis. And I've just been blessed with, obviously, being with Dr. Twersky and having a lot of experience. I mean, I've learned a lot from the medical community, but some of the most important lessons I've learned have been from my patients and their families.
And we, in all of our literature, we have you quoted your until we have 100%
success with 100% of the patients. We have to keep an open mind and look for better ways to improve our treatments and not just be comfortable and sit on our laurels.
And that what a mission that is. Until we have 100% success with 100% of the people. It's like one of these concepts of no victim left behind.
Absolutely.
You know, we are as good.
I believe all life is precious, and people with the disease of addiction, and they don't choose to develop the disease of addiction. Individual drug use to start might be a choice, but nobody wakes up and says, I want to be addicted to heroin or Oxycontin or methamphetamine.
And I'm an old phys ed teacher. I went to law school at night, and I'm a person who always believed that there is a physical person, a mental person, a social person, an emotional person, a spiritual person. And I remember the first time I ever heard you talk, you went right down that list.
Right. My mentor, Dr. Twersky, taught me years ago, addiction is a biopsychosocial spiritual disease. Good treatment focuses on all those aspects because the disease will attack all those parts of a person's life. We're not just treating a computer with a virus, we're treating a complex human being in an ever-changing world. And when we approach them in a more comprehensive biopsychosocial spiritual way, we'll have better longer-term results.
And your facility at Gateway, and I don't mind giving a plug for them. I've seen the beautiful hospital-like setting and campus you have down there has all of those things in one place. And I know
we try. We have doctors, nurses, counselors, spiritual counselors. We try to provide a holistic approach.
When I first started meeting you and started working in law and medicine, I created this little, what I call it, a trilogy. And to me, it was a three-legged footstool. A three-legged footstool is a worthless piece of furniture if a leg is missing. Mm-hmm. So the three legs on the footstool at that time was the law, the coordinated counseling. I'm always going to use that word coordinated in my butchering of medical terms, and medicine-assisted treatment. That was kind of like it was the limit of my knowledge at the time. And what I did is I started talking to courts. If I can get a defendant to engage with me before I go in front of a judge, even before he gets to a plea bargain, and get into real treatment, incorporating as many of those things as possible, then I can do something good for him. And this young man behind us here that's filming this actually created a diagram for us. It says that when a person has a legal problem and a medical problem, an addict, he's probably in the worst position ever. It's the perfect storm, having a legal problem and a medical problem. And then we said that we can maybe take the happenstance of the legal problem and the medical problem and make them both support each other. And so that when we go in front of a court now, your treatment can now become extended care mandated through probation. And we've experienced amazing success with that.
Right. And that's a wonderful
So a lawyer and a
opportunity.
doctor can become very, very good together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that people with drug problems commit crimes, often to obtain more drugs. Most of these people were not career criminals before that.
Right.
It was their addiction that leads them to that. Now, they're still responsible for the consequences of their behavior, but if you don't treat the addiction, that behavior will continue. So they'll suffer, society will suffer. If you can use leverage through the legal system to encourage, inspire, require them to get the help they need, it's win-win. Their health is better, but then the crime goes down. The society is better.
And we actually, you and I have been hanging out together long enough to see that happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
I've
there's a
seen it in
major drop.
so many
I see
cases.
far less cases.
It's
but
a no-brainer. And even if you don't care about the individual, it saves money. You know, it saves taxpayers money. It's less costly to do
Incarceration.
that than to keep incarcerating a person in the price of crime and the price of other medical costs that they'll go through if they don't get help for their addiction as it progresses.
And then what we did is that we actually went down the road with your expert instruction. Every time you are at our events, we kind of modified it a little bit because we believed that when we go in front of a judge and they're sentenced, sometimes there's 20 people in the courtroom to be sentenced, and they have minutes to spend with each file. We can actually ask for a special listing of the case. That's allowed in our procedures. Or you can walk into court with a doctor like you who has always cooperated with us and give us an individually prescribed extended care strategy.
Yes.
And I literally have been known to have my secretary send it to me by phone from a doctor, print it, and attach it to the sentencing order. And now what I've done is made long-term extended care binding. And so
That's
what
great.
a great way for the legal community to help you.
Right, right. And we need more of
Even
this
in
in
a
the future.
non-criminal case where it's just somebody who's violated the law.
Absolutely. And I hope that this expands not only locally but throughout the country.
And that was our next step that we've evolved to now. We see diversionary courts, and I know you've had a lot of experience with diversionary courts.
Right.
We believe, and I'm giving you an editorial by saying we believe, Angelo Papa believes, whatever that's worth, it might be worth nothing. I believe that diversionary courts serve a very, very, very valuable role. However, I'm also concerned about the concept of one size. I think one size fits nobody, not even the intended person. I think when it comes to legal and medical issues, the doctor and the lawyer need to work together to individually prescribe the
Right.
treatment strategy, not have a strategy that's just made cut and paste for everybody.
No, you're absolutely right. Treatment should be individualized. It should not be one size fits all. It should be based on an evaluation by trained medical addiction professionals for their treatment needs, and obviously a trained attorney for their legal needs, and put those together. And when you individualize it, you're going to have a better result in the long run for more people.
I wish I had my colleague here, Judge Paul Pazonsky, retired, because he would immediately probably push back at me and say, Mr. Pape, I have 30 people in the courtroom to be sentenced today.
Yeah.
And so I am calling upon my colleagues in the legal profession that the courts do not have the time to spend that much time to an individual defendant. I don't believe so. Again, my belief. So it's incumbent upon the individual defense attorney, who will see the person as often as need be,
Yes.
to have a doctor like you to work with, see the defendant, and we have to put our pride backward and recognize that we play a supporting role for you. We give legal voice to what you think is best for that patient. And if we have an attorney who will take time, meet with the doctor, or exchange documents, and create a legally recognizable document out of what you think is best, then to me, that is the three-legged footstool at its finest.
Absolutely. That is time and energy well spent. You know,
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Stitch in time saves nine. That time up front can prevent a lifetime of misery. And again, it's good for society.
Good for the whole system.
It's good for it's win-win for
I
everybody.
will someday. I will forward you. I think I already did. I don't know. You probably didn't have a chance to check your email. There's a really George Washington was Abraham Lincoln's hero.
Yeah.
At the occasion of on his birthday, when Lincoln was, I think, in his 20s, Lincoln made a speech somewhere honoring George Washington. It's all about temperance. And Lincoln goes on to describe what it's like to see somebody who is dedicated to alcohol give it up and become a citizen again.
Oh, it's amazing.
It is so eloquent how he said it. So by doing what we're doing, we are now empowering the addict to be part of the group. In World War II, I'm a history fanatic. In World War II, it was a game changer when the United States entered the war. It was over, basically. And to me, the most important ally is the patient defendant.
Yes.
And with these medicine-assisted treatment options now, we now have a committed, responding participant in this treatment process. And we see so much help for it that started resonating, that message. And I'm seeing by the nod of your head, you're not disagreeing with me.
Oh, absolutely agree.
So this brings us to my last thing for you, that we started getting the word out. And we thought the best way to get the word out was go to brick and mortar facilities like the local schools, their community centers. They have all kind of AV equipment and pull down screens. And we have a prevention message with our movie that we have, and then we have somebody like you come with a treatment option. So our new footstool, several of them now, our new footstool is education, law, and medicine working together. And our goal is to neutrally, we favor no particular treatment, we favor no particular doctor or lawyer, we favor no facility. We are neutrally advocating the beginning and ongoing maintenance of a learned debate.
That's great. And it's great that you're in schools. We know that 90% of addiction starts in the teenage years, and of that, about 50% starts at age 15 or younger.
You're teaching me more right now.
With the developing brain. No one questions the logic of advising a pregnant female not to do drugs or alcohol. Why? Because there's a developing brain in this fetus. Yet at birth, is the brain done developing? Absolutely not. It continues to develop until the earlier mid-20s, maybe around age 25. So it's important that we get the message to our young people, protect your brain. I realize they may not fully appreciate the significance of that, but there's absolute reality. The younger an adolescent starts experimenting with alcohol and drugs, the greater the percentage likelihood they'll have a lifelong problem.
And we know that probably the cheapest and most effective treatment there is prevention.
Absolutely.
So if we get here early enough, someday me and you can say they don't need us anymore.
Well, I would love that. We could just go golfing.
Yes. Having said that, I would give you an opportunity. I'm just going to share something without a camera. I had a really weird basal cell cancer thing happen on my nose recently, and I'll tell you what, it made me pay attention to something that was important in life. And I know you had a rough personal go recently, and we'd ask you if you want to share anything with our...
Sure, I'll be happy to share it. Last year, this time, I was just recently diagnosed with a extremely rare and a very aggressive form of cancer, primary small cell carcinoma of the gallbladder. The occurrence is about 1 out of every 100 million people. I said I would have rather won the lottery.
Excellent.
Yeah, but based on what few clinical cases there were in the world, the prognosis unfortunately was considered very poor. A high percentage of the people, if not the majority, did not survive a year. I mean, I stopped looking at the internet. It was just too depressing. I even bought a cemetery plot. And I found myself overnight literally fighting for my life the same way thousands of people in our community with addiction are fighting for their life. The only difference is I'm blessed with receiving the best medical care that science can offer. And even with that, I know I have no guarantees. I have an uphill battle, and I know the odds are against me, but I have a fighting chance. And I believe people who have the disease of addiction should also have the same fighting chance. We're talking about prevention, but once people have a problem, they need treatment. Across the country, less than 20% of people who have addiction ever get any type of treatment, and those who do, it's fragmented, it's not enough, it's not of the quality that we've been talking here over time with a three-prong effect. And because we're not providing that to people, we're losing people by the thousands. Families are being devastated. I mean, all these lives matter, these families matter, these communities matter. So I'm very excited about what you're trying to do with this project. This is an important part. This isn't the total answer to the whole drug problem, but this is a very important piece. And this makes me feel more hopeful and optimistic. And I thank you for what you're doing and inviting me to be part of it.
Well, inviting, our door is always open, and we appreciate the fact that you're on our advisory board of our nonprofit corporation. And there's an old saying that never let perfect be the enemy of damn good.
Absolutely.
We have some damn good options now. So we might not have all the answers, but doing nothing is not an answer.
Right. Our saying in recovery is progress, not perfection.
Correct. And we keep on working at it, and we keep on getting better.
Yeah.
And we're just so the world is blessed and a better place because I am sure God himself is looking after you.
And again, through the grace of God,
Yes.
I responded. I still have a port in. I still go to the hospital every 2 weeks and get immunotherapy treatments, and they're going well. And it's one day at a time for us all.
We respect, as an officer of the court, the Constitution of the United States that says a school shall not establish any particular religion.
Yeah.
But I also, as aggressively, respect my right as a person to express my First Amendment right. And I believe God has put me where I'm at, that he envisions, empowers, keeps healthy and safe people who have a mission that's bigger than they are. And you've always been that way.
Well,
I look up to you and admire you so much. You've been such an inspiration to our whole team, and we appreciate you coming.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure.